Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. And you?
Not too bad.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
You guys are ready.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start off the meeting. Welcome. It looks like we have enough members. Today we're going to be looking at public safety, and I will kick it right off with SEMREC. I just have, forgive me, I don't have the name of the director of SEMREC, but I do have. Would that be yourself, Rob?
Good evening. Yeah, that's me.
All right, awesome. Good guess. I kind of want to name my name there. So we'll kick it off with you. If you'd like to present, you can share your screen.
Sure.
And whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Let me see if this works.
Perfect.
Excellent. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, but I think we're seeing what you're seeing. So with this slide and then this slide on the side. I can see fine. Actually, that's better, I think. If anyone has any trouble viewing the presentation, certainly speak up.
Yeah. I'll just switch it. All right. Let's do it this way.
Okay.
How's that?
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be back in front of the AdCom. I'm a slide or two ahead here. My apologies. Rob Perdome, the Executive Director of the Southeastern Massachusetts Regional 911 District. Southeastern Massachusetts 911 District hosts and operates SEMREC, the Southeastern Massachusetts Regional Emergency Communication Center, which is our operations center, PSAP, and the facility up at High Rock and Foxborough. This is a brief overview of our org chart. It's a little complicated to explain right now, but just figured I'd give a brief overview. I report to a board of directors, who's our oversight committee. I have a deputy director who assists me in my duties. We have 2 section chiefs who operate our 2 divisions, training and operations, and then 4 squads with supervisors. We have a medical director, training officers, attorneys, and accountants, etc. Just a brief overview of what we did last year. We did about 100 total CAD entries, which is our calls for service in our computer system, and about 58,000 911 calls. Originally, when we set out to establish SEMREC and start the district, we were projected to receive about 23,000 911 calls. And over the years, since 2017, when this was formed, to today, just the modernization of technology, the prevalence of cell phones, the way people actually communicate and utilize 911 has increased our call volume by a considerable margin. We maintain strict standards, and we're proud to average ring time for our PSAP was 3 seconds last year. We're just under 2.5 seconds now, and this is kind of an overview of what we saw for last year for calls. It's just another view of the same thing. See, Foxborough's got quite a bit of traffic. Lots on the highways, lots of Gillette, and lots of the center of each community. So just a look back to, this was one of my slides I used pre-go live and kind of how we were establishing SEMREC, and one of the, I thought, important slides to understand the finances on the grant side of the house, and why regionalization financially is very advantageous for communities and incentivized for the state. So pre-SEMREC go live, each community, or the communities collectively, were bringing in about $190,000 in grant money annually combined. So Foxborough was annually bringing in $43,534 to apply towards the operation of their 911 center. And we projected that after go live, we would receive about $890,000, which would represent over a period of 10 years about a $6.9 million abandonment if the four communities didn't reach us. And just an important note, the grant programs in the Commonwealth are not tax-based there. I'll explain how those work in a bit. Fast forward to 2022 and 2023. That number, the $800,000, is turned into $1.7 million of annual grant revenue, and that's largely based off of there's a small increase in the surcharge amount, but also our call volume reflects a higher operational load and therefore an increase in our grant allocation. And what that represents over a period of 10 years is not a $6.9 million abandoned grant. It's about $13.1 million of abandoned grant money over a 10-year period. And that adjusts for the increase that a local community would have seen in the individual assessment. So Foxborough went from about $43,000 a year to about $60,000 a year.
Rob, where are the grants coming from?
I can't. It's a couple slides. I'll show you in just a second if you don't mind.
Okay.
So as far as assessments, we projected an assessment to each community at about $580,000 annually. The assessments are built off of our total operating costs, less any grant revenue or other revenue, and then split by four amongst the four communities. This year, we're projecting $300,000, and last year, or this current fiscal year, was also $300,000. So a great savings. We keep trying to push that number back and maintain that $300K. Our goal is to get as close to zero to the communities as possible, and we'll do that through the Commonwealth reducing the amount of PSAPs seen across the state, and also adding communities dilutes both the cost share and increases our grant funding. So both combined, we're hoping to hedge against both, our natural cost increases, staff increases and raises and cost of fuels and power and stuff, and continue to move that number out of the pockets of the communities and into the pockets of the state as far as utilizing the grants and the surcharge money. Just a quick rundown of what our budgeting process looks like. So as the executive director, I present the recommended budget to the board of directors. The board of directors on first glance either recommends it or does not recommend it. It go to our finance committee. If the board of directors recommends the budget to go to finance committee, our finance committee, which is a separate body, reviews the projected or the proposed budget, and if they see it fit, they can approve it or reject it. Obviously, if it's rejected, it goes back into the process. And once the finance committee approves the budget, it goes back to the board of directors for final adoption and appropriation. So the grant money that we talk about largely, we're eligible for a bunch of different grants, but the big money grants are the state 911 grants. The 911 grants in Massachusetts are protected by law. They're derived exclusively from the surcharges off of any phone line. So if you ever look at your phone bill, there's a surcharge on there. It's $1.25, I believe now. All that money comes into the state 911 department. Is put into a trust fund and is protected under federal and state law. So the 911 surcharge money cannot be used for repairing potholes, for building schools. That money is exclusively set aside and protected for provisioning 911 and providing the services that we provide. These grants are perpetual, they're required. The state can't not do it 1 year unless there's a sweeping federal and state change in law. And the way that the state has provisioned their grants program and protected it, regional emergency communication centers like ours are very much favored in the allocation, as you can see in the local versus regional allocation that I explained earlier. We are also eligible for other grants, and we apply for grants as they come up. We're always seeking funds that are not tax derived or not locally derived. That includes Homeland Security grants, various FEMA grants, local and state eligible, like community compact grants and the like. We received a grant this year from our insurance provider for providing health and wellness equipment for our staff. Did that answer your question? I apologize.
Yes.
So Massachusetts right now has about 240 911 centers. We just got the report yesterday, so I have fresh numbers. We are the third highest state for the amount of PSAPs, and a PSAP is a public safety answering point or a 911 center. So Massachusetts is the third in line for most 911 centers in a state. So first is California, second is Texas. California has a population of, I believe, about 50 million. Texas is about 40 million, and then Massachusetts is about 6 million, with the third highest amount of PSAPs or 911 centers. So the state is really pushing to say it's time to conform with the industry best practices and the best thing for the public safety, which is larger consolidated regional 911 centers that can handle and dedicate the appropriate resources and staff and time to really making sure that they do a great job versus local centers, which also do a great job and they really try very hard, but they're just generally strapped for resources. So having a larger center gives us the ability to really dedicate those resources, including training, latest technologies, and provide a great service to the community. So this is a map of what has been done in the Commonwealth so far. We're the big purple heart in the middle of Southeast Mass there, and you can see Western Mass is really adopted by and far regionalization. And as we get closer to Boston, it's a little less prevalent. We are one of the largest 911 centers, one of the largest RECs in the Commonwealth. Some are bigger square mileage wise, but their populations are a fraction of ours. Just a closer view of us when compared against Bristol County. So we are right now we're the only REC in Bristol County, and I don't expect to see any other regional centers pop up in Bristol County. The state has taken a pretty firm stance as far as no more new centers and just expanding the investments in the centers that are already existing. So that's really all I had. I just want to take the opportunity to have a shameless plug. If anyone needs or thinks they need help, 911's the number to call. You should never need to look up a number or dial a 7-digit number to get help. Our staff is there to help. If you even think you might need 911, please call us and we'll figure it out from there. I should never be afraid to call 911. If you can't call us for whatever reason, you can text 911 as well in the Commonwealth. We prefer phone calls, just a lot smoother of a process. But if there's a situation where you can't talk to us, you can text 911 in the Commonwealth. If you want more information about us, you can visit semrec.gov, and all of our social media is at semrec911. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dennis, you have a question?
Yeah, Rob, is SEMREC involved in response times, police, fire, ambulance, town, and what the average times are in each community and stuff like that?
So yeah, we handle, or at least we capture, tabulate our handling of calls. So from first ring to dispatch. We also help the communities with determining their dispatch to first responder, to dispatch to on scene, shoot times, fastest routes. We do a lot of analytical data and a lot of analysis of our data, and it's provided in the form of maps, dashboards, real time alerts, and those kinds of things.
Right. So if there are any patterns where, like with Norwood Hospital being closed, are there any patterns where that's affecting Foxborough and run times for Foxborough? And are there any recommendations that might come out of that kind of analysis?
Sure. So we did when Norwood Hospital was destroyed in the storm. We actually started taking our data and started to analyze that between COVID, the staffing shortages across the board, and then removing a hospital, one of the primary hospitals from that response and delivery care. Working with Chief Kelleher, we started providing not only how long it's taking for an ambulance to transit to a hospital, but also what the turnaround times at hospitals are. We track that in real time. So every hour we analyze where all of our ambulances went, from which parts of the towns. We look at the turnaround times from the hospital. So when the ambulance actually gets there to when it actually clears and comes back, as well as transit time. So from the scene to the hospital and back in service. We've derived what percentage of the ambulances are in town in service compared to where they were pre-Norwood Hospital going offline. I don't want to step on Chief Kelleher's toes too much if he was planning on speaking about that, but because we capture data so consistently and we capture so much data, we're pretty easily able to avoid analysis like that. And we actually just have like a dashboard up in our center that tracks like a scoreboard. It looks like little gas gauges of each hospital and what their turnaround times are. Because not only were we concerned with the actual extended travel time, but if we're overload or putting additional patients into ERs, their staffs were used to X amount of patients today. Also, as a hospital, this is a giant gap. So, really trying to derive how much that's impacting the hospitals as well as just drive time in general. So yes, we're looking at all those things.
Thank you.
Question on, you have in the past said that you're looking to add additional towns to your system beyond the current 4. How does that affect response time? Adding 1 town won't. Adding 10 towns, does that change the response time significantly?
I wouldn't say it changes the response time. So if we contemplated taking on any community, we wouldn't do so if it impacted our ability or degraded our ability to service any of our current communities. So that's one of our firm kind of tenets of taking on a community is we won't, if it doesn't fit for us, we don't fit for the community, or if it affects, if we take on a community and it just totally hamstrings us, it's not worth anybody's time or effort to do that. So as we take on communities, we kind of determine what that impact is to our center, and then we add staff and support and technology to make sure that each community, each 911 call is treated with the same level of attention to detail and dedicated resources. So to add a community, no, it just kind of iterates and grows. So each call is treated exactly the same, and if we don't have the resources to take on a town safely, we won't do it.
I have a question, Rob. I'm new. So at every shift, do you have a representative from each of the 4 towns there to take the calls, or how does that work?
No, so it's our staff. We are the district hires and employs a professional staff of communications officers and supervisors. So we take every call, we assign each piece, we handle calls from somebody calling 911 or texting 911 to dispatching and assigning resources to them coming back in service and everything in between. So there's no town employees in our building. It's all district employees, and our staff is trained and interacts with them just as another service, just like a hospital interacts with the fire department or the judicial system.
So are they paid from your expenses, or how are they, or from the grants? The district employees?
Correct. So they're paid from our general budget. Part of which is largely funded through the grant program. The other part is to pass through assessments to the communities.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
The allocation to the towns, what is the allocation based on? The population or the number of calls from that town, or what?
Neither. So right now, each of our 4 communities, the district was chartered was they did a lot of legwork to see what works and what doesn't work and what kind of gets convoluted through the year. So right now, our assessments are based off of our total operating budget, less out any revenue, and then divided by 4. So it's an even split. And that really correlates to actual operational impact as well. Now, if we take on another community, they'll be assessed for, they'll be analyzed for how much of an impact they have. And if it's equal parts to the communities now, I'm sure they'll be in a very similar spot. If there's a large increase, let's see, if they're double the operation of our current 4 communities, I'm sure their assessment will reflect that. Or if they're a small percentage of our operation, I'm sure that'll reflect that way as well. But right now, it's an even split by 4.
Hi, Rob. John Mahoney. Any towns close to coming on board or kind of doing the paperwork to get there, or are there no current takers?
We have quite a list right now. Some are closer than others. So we're working through that process. We have a little bit of work left to do on our side as far as charter modernization to make sure that process is efficient. But yeah, we have quite a line. I think the communities are really seeing that the industry is modernizing to the point where a local operation is just not able to be supported.
Are you competing with the Norfolk Center to get, say, North Attleboro or Walpole? Are those communities kind of getting to choose who they go for, or is there something you need to incentivize them to go with you instead of the other one?
Yeah, so it's every community right now, there's no state mandate that you go to one center or another. So what we've been seeing is that communities come and they interact with us, and we basically interview them, they interview us, and they go to the various different regional centers. We do business one way, Norfolk County Control does it a little differently. We have various capabilities that they do or do not have, and vice versa. So communities get to shop. I hate to say like business because we're a public safety entity. We're not a corporation, but they get to kind of see which center they culturally and operationally fit best with, and then they can petition to join that center.
Okay, thank you.
Listen, we kind of work very well together amongst the centers to say, hey, this is a better fit for you or not. We had a South Shore community up near Boston that was looking to join us, and we said we can take you, but there's a center that's probably a better fit for you, and it was in Duxbury. So.
Great, thanks. Bill, anything to add?
Thank you, Dan. I just, Rob is a bit of a modest guy in many ways because he really has not really spoken about the kind of effort that is taken to actually bring this to where it is. It currently sits in fruition over time. This has been about an 8-year effort to get to this point, maybe even longer in some cases. But when it was started out, it was a discussion about, it was first going to be a discussion about where it's going to be located. Originally going to be located in Mansfield. And there's a really interesting story about how we ended up at High Rock Hill. But I think to do justice to what this center is all about, I think it would behoove you, and Rob could probably do this, to set up a time so you could actually all see it in motion, because the center itself is extraordinary. It's probably one of the top technology centers anywhere in the country. The level of technology they have is stuff that I would say would rival it to something like at NASA. It's that high level. So it's really it's everything state of the art. They use they're considered to be one of the best models in the state. In fact, the state 911 actually looks to SEMRC all the time as the model as to how they should do it. So I don't think any of us on the board, I currently serve as chairman of the board. I've been I'm chairman of the board for the past 4 years. And none of us actually envisioned us being in a position where we would not only see the success of this, but also the savings to the town is extraordinary. And I think it's one of the best kept secrets in many ways. But, to look at this from a purely financial perspective, we were spending close to $1 million a year just running dispatch out of the police and fire department. We're now spending $300,000 for a far better product than we ever had before, and don't have any of the headaches we have to deal with. Rob deals with everything with his own staff, and he's done all the hiring and firing, and deals with all the issues that go with that, and dealing with the state as well. What's interesting too is the fact that during the whole process of dismantling dispatch in Foxborough, we offered many of the current dispatchers the opportunity to interview, and actually only 1 or 2 actually did interview. In the end, I don't know if I actually hired any of them or not, Rob. I don't remember if any took the actual position. But at the end of the day, he's got a really top-notch crew up there that works some extraordinary hours to keep the center running 24 hours a day. So it's I do encourage you to see it, because it's a marvel in of itself to actually see it in operation. I know that my fellow friends here that are going to be here tonight, the police chief and fire chief, share in my satisfaction and praise of the operation. It's quite something to see. So thank you.
Great, appreciate that.
Just want to interject that Sharon and I had the opportunity to visit there earlier this week, and yes, very impressive and top-notch operation. It's kind of mind-blowing to see the capabilities that they have to monitor everything that's going on and dispatch, and to hear about the training and the capabilities that the staff have.
Thank you, Miles.
Question on what happens when you get a call from somebody who's, let's say, in North Attleboro or Sharon. You can't just hang up on them.
No, we certainly just don't hang up on them. So if it's out of jurisdiction call that comes to the center, we have a process to get it to the correct center. The 911 system across the Commonwealth is one big 911 system. So if it's as simple as a call that's misrouted from North Attleboro, we get a lot of Brockton calls. If it's nothing that we can help about, or it's nothing that's actually dealing with our jurisdiction, we just push a button and off it goes. And they get all the data we have to just forward it along. If it's something that's acute, that's very urgent, cardiac arrest, somebody's in a sinking vehicle or somebody's on fire, we'll start mitigation instructions and then the conference in the other center. But that's a very natural process. It happens quite often.
Did anybody catch it happen to see over the weekend that they were actually very helpful in locating a person that got lost in the Foxborough forest, the state forest? They were able to ping the person's phone, and they were able to locate the person because they were lost and couldn't find their way out. And the fire department and police department were able to assist in the rescue of that individual. But due to the technology that Semric had, they were able to locate the person fairly quickly. So it was on Channel 7 News over the weekend.
Awesome. Glad they were found safe. Any further questions for Rob? All right. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your time. Thank you for presenting to us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Grace.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. I do like in person better, but this will have to work. Hopefully, this is the last time that we're doing it through Zoom. You all have the workbook that the town put out. I do have a little slideshow that I'll share. A little bit about the department. And just give me 1 second. Is that, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Sure. Sorry about that. So real quickly, I won't get too much into the dynamics of the agency and all the services that we provide, as this is more on the budget aspect, but it is important that the residents and AdCom and everybody know that the police department is a community-based organization that focuses on community at the same time keeping the community safe. These are just some of our programs that we run with our staff, reaching out. Many of these issues are huge issues that we encounter, especially with mental health issues and sexual assaults that we're seeing in the younger generation. We partner with all of our schools, all of our libraries. Our kids are everything to us in the town. We run events all summer. Of course, our animal control officer and working with the vets is key. And our partners up at Patriot Place and the YMCA when they host events, we're always there. And when the offices develop this program to raise toys for the Foxborough Discretionary Fund. That was our 4th carload. They almost had to shut us down. It's just fantastic how responsive the officers are to the community and how responsive the community is to the department. It's a great partnership. One thing that occurred this year was that the police department earned the certification from the Mass Police Accreditation. Now that is, it could be a 10-second comment, but the reality is 319 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Only 98 are accredited, only 19 have been certified. So this has been a goal probably for 25 years for the department that we reached. We now have 8 months to get accredited and to be one of those elite agencies in the state. The accreditation guidelines and policies are the gold standard of policing. So when people ask, how do you do use of force? How do you do investigations? How do you do your hiring? You're meeting all of those standards. And it's important that the residents know that that is what their police department is doing. In regards to the budget, I'm sorry, the right side is probably cut off. I didn't know where the faces were going to pop up. So I redrafted, this is the organizational chart, but what I've added in there is a little bit of our projection of what we're missing in that chart. So obviously, is the chief, and underneath myself is my deputy chief, and then currently I run 2 lieutenants. What I'm missing is a 3rd lieutenant to deal with Gillette Stadium, planning events, and Homeland Security. So that position is something that hopefully will come down the road. Under the patrol lieutenant, we have 5 sergeants, and they run the 4 shifts, the 3 shifts, the 12 to 8, the 8 to 4, the 4 to 12. The administrative lieutenant oversees the detectives directly, without a detective sergeant, and he also is in charge of all the other property, the court officer, the building. He's a liaison with SEMREC as we keep building that out. And then we have our reserve officer team, which is overseen by one of the sergeants. We lack a traffic officer. And more importantly, is we actually lack enough patrolmen on a regular basis to manage the shifts without forced overtime. It's been a constant issue, and we're really seeing the challenge as the younger generation are just not workhorses anymore. No disrespect to them. I think they're probably living healthier lives, but they're just not putting in the extra 20, the extra 30 hours anymore. Double income, someone staying at home. Guidelines for the budget were very clear.
Mike, just related to that prior chart. So do those needs represent current openings? Are they things that are in the strategic plan and are planned for in the coming years? What's the status of those?
This is the beginning of the plan. Let's put it that way. So I'm just giving a little introductory, but I won't get too involved with it. But I just don't. But when you run your patrol shift, officer for officer, it's just unsustainable, especially with the demands. So part of the strategic plan, which started in about 2018, it never got finished, and now we've just rolled into, as you see with SEMREC, the amount of work that we've just incurred lately it's been daunting. The calls for service, they're just skyrocketing. So yes, that would be part of a rollout justifying every one of those positions clearly.
Yeah.
Again, the budget was very strict, 2.5. Make sure you meet it. Every year, every budget year, there's a cost analysis done on every single police officer, what their costs are, their hourly rate, and time off, and how it is affected by the budget. And of course, where does the budget go? 89% of it is salaries. 8% is expenses, capital outlay, which is my cruises, 3%, and of the budget, 11% currently goes to overtime. And again, here's the explanation of the staffing. Right now, we run 1 sergeant and 4 officers per shift. That's our bare minimum. Unfortunately, we can't even meet that minimum on the midnight to 8 shift on 4 out of the 7 nights, because Sunday through Thursday. I run the midnight shift with only 2 officers on the road and a sergeant. It's not ideal, but you gotta make the budget at the end of the year. All the sergeants are 1 for 1 when they take a day off. There's no 2 sergeants ever scheduled on a shift. And one thing is the station officer. We talk about SEMREC and the success that it is, and it absolutely is. And I'll put a plug here for Rob. I meet with the Norfolk County chiefs and with the Mass chiefs. Our SEMREC is the model for the state. And what he's done, he is actually, because Massachusetts was anti-regional. It doesn't work. Everybody built dispatch centers in their police buildings. And the reality is it is the most supportive tool that I've seen in policing in 24 years, without a doubt. And when he's modest, when he says people want to come, they are lining up. We have some issues with data conversions and CAD systems before you make the jump. So trying to get all that fixed first, because it's very expensive to convert people's data. But when we went to regional dispatch, the police department is the one that had to carry the load of when these 2 people left the building, who's going to take our walk-ins, who's going to handle all our calls. So the police department was given 3 people The problem is 3 people doesn't cover that position 5 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So we actually lost staff off the road. And when we went to regional dispatch, and at the time, it was the best compromise we could do. We didn't know how this was gonna roll out. As it turned out, it's been the best thing ever, and we're getting more bang for our buck. But some of that savings hopefully will be looked at to say, geez, we should at least bring our staffing levels out on the road back to where it was to pre-Semrick.
Mike, could you explain that last bullet? You had a couple of CIJIS and Open Fox. Would you explain what they mean?
Sure. So when we went to regional dispatch, we were obligated by the state to run our own CGIS network. For many years, and those are all the, that's where all our data comes in for running plates throughout the state, throughout the country, warrant hits. All of that, all of our property that's ever get entered into these national databases, we have to do validations, stolen cars, missing persons. So that was a big change because police officers actually the police department had just kind of put it all onto the dispatches, and they were working under the police department's agency code. When we went to Semrick, we are mandated to keep that system, and Rob has his own. So now we have to retrain all of our staff up to that level to keep that up. And now Rob's team is awesome, and one of their training coordinators helps the new officers learn it, but it's like a different language. So we're mandated to make sure we're answering those. Those come in 24 hours, 7 days a week. If there's a hit on a warrant out of North Carolina, there's a response time that has to be submitted. So all of that station officer has to keep doing that work. And when we talk about the budget, overtime seems to be the one that it looks like it's something that's tangible, it's measurable, it's something that's controllable. And this is just a little breakdown, like when we talk about contractual time off. This is people's earned vacation time. They take the day off. We have to backfill the position. If a sergeant takes the day off, I got to backfill it with a supervisor. One thing that we saw is their abuse. Is overtime, at least from a taxpayer's perspective, is it being spent where it shouldn't be spent? And people would say, well, what's going on with the sick time? Last year, my officers averaged 5 sick days a year. That's it. And that includes family sick time. The police department right now has 67 children under the age of 17. So they only took 5 days off. This last year, we bumped up to 9. A lot of that was COVID mandates, where the officers or their kids were exposed and they had that 5-day window and they couldn't come back to work and they were forced to use their own time. Well, just those 5 additional days or 4 days is almost a $50,000 cost to the overtime line item. And it's not abuse, but it's just because the staffing's so thin. There's nothing there to absorb this. So that's why I highlighted that right there. But all the other line items are just our training, and even our training is as we go through police reform and we meet all the requirements, which we have, and we're up to date on everything across the board, is we're mandated additional training that we have to send them officers to maintain their certification. And it's got to come from somewhere. So it comes out of the training overtime. And this is this year, when I sat in front of everybody last year, the budget got approved, it looked good, and I automatically lost three police officers to the state police. Another officer, him and his wife, moved away. So I lost 4, and I ended up with some long-term illnesses. So you plan, but when you're missing 8 people on July 1st, it's daunting. So right now, as you can see, the patrol overtime, because I even had to implement a forced policy among the members to fill the shifts, to make them work, because we just don't have the bodies. We have since almost recovered. I've got them hired, and I only have 2 out with long-term injuries, and 1 is wrapping up their FTO. But that also was with the assistance of leaving civil service in the fall, that I was able to move a little faster. On the police expenses, there's an $11,000 increase. 16 items have no increases whatsoever. I did have one of the accounts, I just made another line item, pulling it from existing line, just so I can more accurately document equipment spending. The cost of uniforms, one of the things when I came on board is implementing a new uniform policy, and making sure that the officers all have the same uniforms, the same equipment. And some of those mandates that I implement, some of them I have to pay for. So, and of course, with everything else, the price is going through the roof on some of the equipment. I didn't have an expense account for the animal control officer. So I have a $1,500 account, as we learned that when we take in animals from animal abuse cases, we actually become the owner and the custody of that animal. And we're responsible for all the vet bills as well, while that case works its way through court. When we had one of those animals. So, and then there was the pre-employment and medical mandates. So as police reform rolls through in this year, next year, and the third year, is my reserve officer team, many of them have been here 18, 20 years, are all going to be unable to maintain their positions. They're not going to be able to get the 2,500 hours of training, because number one is I can't pay them, and I don't have open spots for them. And two, they have other jobs. So they're going to leave. So I'm going to now have to try to replace them with maybe some retired police officers, which I've been very lucky reaching out to Norfolk County. But part of the hiring process is a mandate by post to make sure that they all have psychological exams and medical backgrounds up to a certain standard. So all of those are a cost. Capital outlay, this year we're looking for 3 Mark cruisers. I still have 2 cars outstanding that haven't come in from last year. So these cars are sitting around about 78,000 miles. They're 5 years old. They'll get moved to the detail fleet. That helps me supplement for Gillette. So this is probably a little under, because the state bid list came out and they moved the cars $3,000, but it is what it is. This is what I asked for. So the bottom line is, on that budget that you see in front of you, you'll see that the stipend increase was the biggest number that popped out. And that was in the fall when we left civil service. The agreement was with the union was to fully fund their educational incentive. Well, we didn't ask for any money, and with the hopes of absorbing it out of this year's budget, because it'll only be a half a year, but we do have to pay for it coming this fiscal year, and that's $116,000. And that's a CIP issue with the which we're not really talking about today. But I will say the last 3 years, I haven't overspent on any of on the budget, and so I hope I can make it as well. Bill has guaranteed me that money that came out of the civil service, the educational stipend, that we knew that it would be kind of close not funding it at town meeting. So we'll see how it goes, but I think we'll make it. And this is my little thinking ahead, and I'm gonna go real quick because it's not really part of the budget, but the town has done multiple studies, and every single one of them, no matter how you pick it apart, they paid a lot of money for them, is that at the end of the day, the police department in Foxborough, a structure with a deputy, 2 lieutenants, sergeants, is designed not to have a stadium. It's the same as Walpole. It's the same as a regular town. So we have over 64 events tentatively planned already up at Gillette, some smaller, some larger, and that's before the NFL season. So that entity up there, and they're great partners, they're a full-time job. They need a full-time person working with them, with all of the other Homeland Security branches as they develop and as they plan for events. And right now, with myself, a deputy, and 2 lieutenants, there's only 4 of us to run these events. And many of these events require all 4 of us. or 2 of us, or 3 of us, and then you roll in Patriot Place on Saturday and Sunday with all the liquor issues up there, there is not enough command staff to long-term sustain the supervision up there. It is a burnout for sure, because literally I have to tell my lieutenants that you don't get vacation in July or August because we have so many events planned, because I just don't have enough commanders to choose from. And a lot of these, and a lot of these studies were since 9/11 and all the mandates. We used to worry about intoxicated people. That's far from our issue now. It's bigger things. And one little historical thing is when I started in 1999, we had 30 police officers. We had 9,700 calls for service. We're up to 26,000 calls for service. We have, and we run 2 full school districts with the charter school, which is K through 12. We support through the SRO program and our own schools. We do follow-ups on all domestics. We do everything with the security plans with the state, the large venue task force, and we're connected with the JTTF. That is all encompassing for our time. We have 9 hotels and motels now, which we never had. We have over 350 accidents a year. Traffic is increasing. The police reform mandate certification, that's a whole nother administrative requirement, from training to HR to reporting. And all these use of force, national data, these weren't even being done. We are all in full compliance. And then, we'll also have potentially the marijuana licensing and the inspection that's going to be added onto the police department as well. So, and this is just eventually what we need to address is that we need a traffic officer, we need a special ops, an event planner, Homeland Security lieutenant for Gillette Stadium, Patriot Place. We need 2 patrol officers to fill out the bodies, and a detective sergeant to oversee the major case that get investigated.
So
All right,
none of
awesome.
those positions are in the current budget, is that correct?
They are not. They are not. This was a tight year. The town manager was clear about where we were financially and finance.
So I have
So-
a question for Bill Keegan, and that is the staffing needs that he's shown there, that's supported by independent studies, kind of concurring with the need. How is that? Is that in a strategic plan for the town, or discussions happening with the board of directors around this? What, from your perspective, is the plan to assess and address some of the needs that have been identified?
Well, it's a big problem, because it all comes down to available dollars, and at the end of the day, we only have so much that we can spend in any direction. But our biggest concern, and what I've tried to do, is look at ways we can raise additional funds and find ways we can self-supplement the departments, both our public safety departments, because of the fact that we do have genuine needs. There's no question that the chief has highlighted a lot of those in tonight's presentation. What I do think, we've talked about marijuana as a potential for a potential revenue stream that could actually potentially help that situation. At the same time, it also creates, a question as to how much it's going to impact the town at the same time. The other thing that strikes me in listening to what the chief said tonight is that with all the time being spent at Gillette Stadium, I'm not sure why we're not charging Gillette Stadium for those costs. Because really, they're costs that are unique to the stadium, not unique to the community. So I think we should find a way to help provide additional funding for those kind of things through the stadium, as opposed to just paying it for as a community. So it's supposed to be a zero impact to the town with respect to the costs that are being affected by the town in that respect. So it's something we should be looking at if that's in fact the case. So, and there's no question, I think that the time that the chief talks about being spent on planning for events those things are not paid for by Gillette Stadium. Those are paid for, they only pay for the time that is actually paid at the stadium itself. They're not paid while they're planning for these events day after day during the week leading up to those events. And so that's something that really has to be explored a little bit further, because it's not something the town should be paying for if it's specific to those events at Gillette Stadium. So I think those are questions that have to be looked at. I think and then it's a question of, what other possible revenue sources can we look to try and raise funding for that. And it's not just as simple as saying, let's go to the federal government, let's go to the state, because oftentimes when you look at those options, the federal government will provide you a grant a lot of times, but it'll be for 3 years, and then the funding drops off, and then the town is stuck with the bill. So I think that's something where, it is a short-term gap thing. And we've actually, as you can see, the chief pointed out in his last slide, that we have not been ignoring the additional staffing. We've added 9 police officers during that time frame. So it's not like we haven't been adding. It's just the fact that, the call volume has increased steadily over that period of time. And a lot of it was, I think, COVID related too. I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of things happening right now that have caused people to be, I would say, impatient, if you will, with how they're dealing with each other, and causing a lot more domestic issues than we've seen in the past. And I think that's a reason why the police department is called upon so often in this day and age. So, but I do think the chief has highlighted a number of things that we clearly need to talk about further and come up with a better plan to address over the longer term. And I think some of his points are well taken. That, but again, it's not that we haven't ignored it. We just haven't been able to fund it based on our existing given our current revenue stream.
Chief, I remember last year, eliminating civil service was a major goal, and to your credit, you really were able to get it done, and we're in a very different place. Have you felt any positive impact yet with civil service going on in terms of filling positions? I recall you had 4 open positions last year you couldn't fill, and now without civil service in terms of filling positions and getting better qualified people, are you starting to see any impact?
I can tell you, Dennis, since we left, I did fill 1 position almost immediately, which was a full-time academy trained police officer who had actually grown up in town and was able to jump on board right away. He had worked at a college. He had his college degree and been working at a municipality for 7 years. He's a dad with 4 kids, mom and dad still, and I was able to grab him, and I was able to do a background check in 3 weeks because he had worked for us for like 5 years, and he's the nicest young man. So and I can tell you what Foxborough's been able to do as a community from top to bottom and where we stand. I get and that wouldn't be the hiring process. People send me resumes, but everybody's asking if we're taking bodies. Obviously, we're going to follow our policies, our hiring policies, and get our tests going and get an active list. But now, if I in a situation where all of a sudden something happens and I lose 2 or 3 bodies, I can get them quick now. I'm not tied. My hands aren't tied anymore. It's really been beneficial.
That's great.
I have a question. I guess for Bill Keegan and maybe the chief, or the chief could just listen. I'm not even sure if it's something we can take care of now, but I'm new and I'm a novice, and I look at the budget every week in each department, and I guess you've asked each department not to increase their budget by 2.5%. Is there a way? I mean, it seems as though, this is kind of an emergency or important, very, very important situation the police department's in. Is there a way that, I'm not sure now, but in the future, that you might ask a department to say, you know what, increase it by 2% or 1.5%, and we could give that extra to a department. I don't know if this is something towns do. Again, this is all new to me, but we could give the police department a 3% increase, a 4% increase. I mean, I'm just, thinking about these other streams of revenue, and they may take a while, they may not happen. So what can towns do internally? I don't even know if that's to be answered here, and that's okay if it isn't, but this presentation seems pretty serious in some of the issues. And I think if if more of the townspeople saw a presentation like this, instead of just going to town meeting and look at the papers, very quickly in an hour or two or three, they would understand this, I think, the seriousness of it. So I don't know if that.
So just let me just address a few of those things.
Yeah.
My direction to departments was that we want to come in with a 2.5% budget, which, by the way, we haven't even met yet. We are coming in closer to about 2.7 to 3%, and I think that I didn't say to any one specific department that you had to meet that department. What I said, I'm looking to try and get to that point. So you saw several that came in under 2%, under 2.5%, as did the police department in this particular instance as well. So, and there are others that did as well. So there were very few instances where people exceeded that, but if they did, it was for a very good reason, and reasons that you've also, and more often than not, have agreed with as well. So it's not like we're saying it's an absolute, but what I did was a goal that we set for everyone, and this was a year. And if you take a look, if you go back in time, over the past, this is my ninth budget that I've worked on since I've been here, that we've averaged closer to 3 to 4%. In terms of growth of the budget year over year. Some cases it's actually gone a little bit higher than that. And that's because our revenues were able to support that. But in this particular year, we're coming out of a couple 2 years back to back where our revenues were limited. We want to take a very careful and measured approach going into the budget for next year. That being said, I don't expect that to be the case on the other side. Now, there are a couple budget pressures that we need to be mindful of. One is the cost of oil. And if you can see in what's going on in the world today, they're now saying that gas could be, $5, $6 a gallon, which could really impact the budget in ways which none of us had anticipated. The other thing is the fact that the cost of heating oil in the buildings or any of the kind of the cost of natural gas, those are all being impacted as well, given the current geopolitical situation. So we have to be mindful that those are budget pressures that are going to come that really haven't been factored into in the long term. But we could find ways to make that happen if we had to. But again, I keep drawing on our reserves when we do that, and I really don't like to see us do that given the circumstances. So I think what we were trying to do this year was to come in with a very measured approach to try and come up with a budget that fit within our budget revenues this year without drawing too much on our reserve situation, so we could go into the following year in a pretty healthy situation. The chief has done a really good job of highlighting his needs. I think there are needs that have been identified in virtually all the departments that we could use more with. Clearly, public safety is high on our list of trying to support both fire, police, and any one of our public safety actions. We want to make sure that we're protecting the community as best we can. But having said that, there's multiple pressures on that department because it's hard to find police officers, number one. I mean, getting out of civil service was huge for us because it does provide us more flexibility that we could have that we didn't have before. And I think that we're going to be better off going forward because we'll be able to, again, have a better flexibility hiring local officers who are familiar with the community. I think the fire chief can actually talk to you about that because he's had the history of doing that in Foxborough, and it's worked out really, really well for us. So now the police department will have that same ability to do that. So in short, yes, we're very cognizant of that. We're also very mindful of the fact that we're put in a very difficult spot to try and make it all fit together. And I do think that to the extent that we are aware of the approach that the chief is using to try and keep his operation running, but I also think at the same time we have to continue to be measured in our approach so we don't overspend in any one direction at any one time. There could be times when sometimes are worse than others. But I think we want to continue to do something where we can support the budget with a proper rate of growth going forward that we can afford.
Chief Grace, real quick, do you have a metric to compare to other towns? Like schools have students per teacher. Do you have officers per calls and how they compare with Mansfield, Walpole, local communities? Any easy, quick ways to see it if Foxborough is really behind or above the surrounding groups?
Yeah, there's all national statistics about population, but unfortunately, when you look at Foxborough, we're not normal. We have an NFL stadium. So there isn't a community in Massachusetts that has the demands that are a business that puts these kind of demands on. And then actually in the NFL, there's only 3 stadiums that aren't in a major city. So it's that part of the it's like I mean ultimately when we're talking about we're going to build that out as another town on a CAD system and start collecting that data. When I talk about the 26,000 calls for service, that doesn't include Gillette. We have another way of calculating all of those calls for service. But you know, I think there's a formula that the federal government uses. I think it's 1.5 maybe per population, but it really starts breaking down on what are your calls for service, what crimes that you're seeing, and on top of that, what are you doing proactively to be in your community, and how are you addressing growth in your community? How are you addressing the needs of residents? For example, you could have a certain population and it says you have 7 cops, but as the town grows and neighbors are asking for traffic studies or my road people are speeding, it's critical that the police department is able to address those all the time and work with your town planners. So, and as things build out, as we approve, you know, we have 9 hotels in Foxborough. You don't even want to see what kind of calls come out of those. Okay. And we have all cast of characters. If you don't have 9 hotels and you take the same size and compare it to Norfolk, that has no hotels, I can tell you between 11 at night and 2 a.m. in the morning, it's a different animal. So I don't know if John, if I really answered your question, but we're very unique. We are like a standalone police department.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I wouldn't want to see us way behind other communities either. And obviously with the extra, with the extra stadium needs. But if Walpole had an extra 10 officers than you, I'd be quite surprised.
I can't get that right this second, and maybe give me 5 minutes. I might be able to send a text message, but it's always not the number. The number it's where you're applying the number and how you're addressing the needs and the calls and the crime trends and being proactive and with your schools. You know, some departments pull their SROs out of their schools as soon as they don't have enough people. I can tell you the kids in this community, I grew up in town. I had 3 kids in the school system. I'm never doing that. The schools are everything to me, and that's where I'm going to start with. So if we got to force someone on an overtime shift, it is what it is. But the SRO is going to the high school at 8 o'clock in the morning to help the kids.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, your first slide highlighted, among other things, distracted driving.
Yes.
We'll be talking in the not too distant future about more electronic signs in town. Tell me or tell us something about the statistics. Are the electronic signs a significant distraction that therefore cause accidents?
Well, we're getting into a variety of different conversations here, Jack, but I will tell you, if you notice, they did a study because one of our residents in Foxborough, you guys know the story, it's so sad, but he was the one who initiated the bill because he was talking to his son who was on the cell phone, who passed away in the accident, Jerry Sibley, and Sergeant Fiscaldo had to make notification, ran to him and drove him to Sturdy Hospital. So Jerry pushed for that bill for the hands-free. And when they came out with the statistics, we were one of the communities that had stopped the most amount of vehicles for hands-free violations. Now, they weren't money citations, but we were addressing people. What you'll see with cars and technology is eventually technology is going to force the cell phone out of people's hands. As people buy newer cars, the car's going to acclimate. And number one is the older generation will be less talking to the slice of pizza, and they will be acclimating. And you'll see the hands-free come down a little bit. And I think you'll see people, but The billboard signs, I don't know. I can't answer that. You drive down Saugus and you see them everywhere. They're like, it's, but out on the highway, are people gonna look up and see them? I mean, someone did their homework, who went to school for marketing and says they work.
Nice family picture in the reporter, by the way.
Oh, well, which one was it?
Your son with the hockey.
Well, we're missing one. My other son's out in Fort Carson, so thank you. And my daughter's upset. She didn't know she was going to get dragged into it. Didn't wear the right shoes, so.
Any further questions, Bill? Go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thought here, and it's one that I'm sure I'll be criticized later on for saying this, but I want to just say that, several references have been made to the fact that we're an NFL community, but which raises the specter and concern that I raised before, is the fact that, are we getting the right level of revenue from the stadium revenues that we should be getting in order to support the community overall? And the answer is no, we're not. If you take a look at the growth of revenues that have occurred at Gillette itself in the past 20 years, we are a fraction of what they've made into the way the current the lease is structured. As such, it doesn't generate the revenue to support our organization. The references that both chiefs that can make here tonight, both Mike Kelleher as well as Chief Grace can attest to, is the amount of time that they put into planning for events and things of that nature, which are never provided to as revenue for the community in that respect, are not supported in that way. They're not directly supported by the stadium events. So I think that's something that we have to reassess and have to take a look at as a community, because we're trying very hard to be a very forthright and professional community in all levels, but we're not receiving the level of support that we're getting through the revenue sources that we're getting from that particular venue. So it is an important issue. And I think that we shouldn't lose sight of that, because a lot of times being spent up there, a lot of times we have a great relationship with those guys. We want to continue that, but we still need to have a better source of revenue other than the current revenue source we have.
Yep, I duly noted, and I don't think you would be criticized for that. In fact, I believe I've had a couple conversations with Jack on that very subject over the last 2 or 3 years. So I don't believe you're alone in that regard. So, barring any further questions, I'm gonna move on to the fire department budget and Chief Kelleher. Thanks, Chief Grace.
Thank you. And if anybody has a question or anything, the door's always open. Swing down, call me, email. I'm always available. Hi, Mike.
How's it going? I just want to make one point that I got stuck with the last slot because Roger Hatfield always went over his time. I think next year the AdCom needs to reevaluate the structure here.
All right, we'll slide you in first next year.
Oh, no. It was Rob's fault. I haven't left the office yet, okay?
All right. So I'll try to be brief. I'll just do a quick kind of recap of the year. Let me just. How's that? Everyone can see that?
Yep, good to go.
Okay. All right. So real quick, kind of just a quick year in review. Last year, again, was dominated by COVID vaccines, COVID and COVID testing, all things COVID. We're just coming out of it now. So we were well positioned with our move with public health nurse to be, ahead of the curve as far as all of the COVID response. We pivoted really from testing to vaccinations. Again, we were leaders here in Southeastern Massachusetts. We were the distribution site because we had the public health nurse. We had a state-sanctioned vaccine program. So we provided vaccines to about 9 communities down here. So we were kind of the focal point as far as vaccine distribution. After we really started to come out of the COVID, last spring, our run volume skyrocketed. We kind of saw a flat start to 2020 as the virus took hold, and then really we saw a real surge we're starting to really see the full impact of Norwood Hospital being closed too. It's really affected our operation. There's obviously things we need to do to be able to respond to our calls, but those measures that we take to respond to these calls do come with inherent risk to the community. So, that is noted. I know there's been some discussion about the impact. Ambulance calls take longer, both in transport time, and then with some of the stuff going on in healthcare today, there's longer wait times to offload that patient too. So it's a double impact. It's not just the distance to the hospital, it's also wait times, because the 60 or 70,000 visits a year that Norwood Hospital saw, those patients are going other places. So it's not just, it's a volume issue, especially when it comes to a community hospital like Sturdy, where you saw the closure of Pawtucket Memorial Hospital in Pawtucket just over the line, because it is a border city in Attleboro. Those patients are coming over the border to go to Attleboro, and then you have the closure of Norwood Hospital, and you're feeling that pressure south from basically Foxborough south. You're seeing real high volume and high wait times. So when we show up in the ambulance, sometimes we're held in the ambulance bay, and our paramedics are sitting in the back of the ambulance, sometimes for up to a half hour, 45 minutes, waiting for a bed that we can wheel the patient in and offload. So it's not just we're transporting to further places like Boston, Brockton, Taunton, Newton, Wellesley, but then we're also experiencing a long wait time. So just want to just kind of highlight that point. And obviously Gillette's really busy. This year, we're looking at a very busy year with concerts. We've had some meetings again today, just reviewing some concert layouts and stage layouts, seating charts for the floors and the various acts that are coming in. And then obviously construction's busy too. So your fire department, we're both an emergency response agency and also a regulatory enforcement agency. So we have those responsibilities during construction and remodeling, where we look at fire protection features and sprinkler systems, egress, and then fire alarm systems, things like that. So we do review and approve various safety systems. A lot of these buildings, like the $250 million renovation at Gillette, we have to review all of those safety systems and make sure they're compliant, up to code. We work with the town manager. The Board of Selectmen sets goals for the town manager, and we support those goals as working under the town manager and as department heads. So some of the goals, I just wanted to highlight some of the goals that we have, that the town manager has that we support. And one of those is creating new business models or finding alternative revenue sources. So obviously, through insurance premiums and through insurance billing, we have ambulance revenue. We're very diligent in our paperwork and ambulance billing processes. So, that revenue comes back to the community through vaccines and COVID testing. We created a public health revolving account, so we can have a fund that's basically self-fulfilling. So when we're providing vaccines and things like that throughout the community, that money comes back. So next year we can buy more vaccines. So we gave out a number of flu vaccines, COVID vaccines, things like that. And a lot of that's reimbursable through either Medicare or private insurance companies. One of the things I'm not sure everyone's aware, but we repair apparatus, fire apparatus for Norfolk, Franklin, and Rentham. Prior to the pandemic, there were workforce issues, especially with trades like mechanics, fire apparatus mechanics are like unicorns. They really just don't exist. So to be able to have a certified and qualified fire apparatus mechanic is really in demand. So anytime you go by any of the fire apparatus manufacturers in the area, there's one up on Route 1, you can see trucks from all over New England just sitting there waiting to be fixed. So there's really a backlog. For every 10 mechanics that retire, 4 take their place. So there's a shortage of qualified mechanics in general in the automotive industry. So what we're seeing is a willingness, and really it wasn't an idea I had. It was a request from a neighboring chief. He had a truck break down. It was an emergency. He had another truck out of service. He approached me and said, "Hey, can you just send your mechanic over to take a look?" He went over, fixed it, really out of goodwill. At that point, we didn't have an intermunicipal agreement. And one of the things that the chief requested is, "Hey, can you fix our fire trucks?" So, that program's kind of blossomed and caught on. So that's another thing. If you go by the public safety building over the last 6 months, we have our cell tower. AT&T's coming on the cell tower. We already have Verizon. That's additional revenue into the general fund for the community. I think it's about $3,500 a month, Bill. You can correct me if I'm wrong. We're very diligent in FEMA reimbursements. We started off the pandemic. We were the central collection point for all of FEMA reimbursements for the town for the COVID-19 pandemic. So Assistant Chief Buckley was really the tip of the spear as far as that went. Exorbitant amount of work. We were able to get a consultant on board to help us with that, but all of that went through the fire department initially. It was pretty busy. And then we transitioned that over to the finance team with the consultant. And we also had a public-private partnership with Transformative Healthcare. We helped staff the vaccine site, during the vaccine rollout. So we not only did we serve as the focal point, but because we had the depth and staff, from staffing major events at Gillette Stadium, we were able to pull in those resources from our surrounding communities to help staff because they couldn't get enough healthcare workers to staff that site. So really good private partnership. The revenue loss that the town saw from billing details from the fire department side during the COVID-19 pandemic was made up because Transformative Healthcare paid all of our individuals their detail pay and the surrounding communities, and the town get the 10% administrative fee. So we billed out about $1 million in details for the surrounding communities in Foxborough. So the town made about $100,000 in that revenue fee, which helped offset that loss in that year. So this is just some of the collaboration that goes on during the year throughout the community. Obviously, we're very linked tightly with the Board of Health. Deputy Chief Kenman is the town's public health nurse as well, so we collaborate with them as probably the most out of any department. We're heavily engaged with the inspections department and the building commissioner. So, that's want to make sure that we have staff. We meet weekly, so everyone's in the loop. These are just some other goals that we help support. We're always looking for ways to become more efficient, basically sharper. We're also in the process of becoming accredited. That should happen within the next 6 to 8 months, hopefully, maybe a little longer. Again, COVID kind of delayed this. Being accredited in Massachusetts, there's no fire departments that are accredited. There's 2 in New England. Nationally, it's caught on, but up here in the Northeast, we're especially public safety wise, we're usually slow to come to the table. So about 12% of the U.S. population is protected by accredited agencies, but we're hoping that Foxborough will be one of them in the next, the coming months. This just gives you a 3-year comparison on like our fire inspections and plan review, things like that. So again, this is getting into the more regulatory enforcement side. So you can see we've had a pretty significant increase in inspections over the last 3 years, even with COVID. One of the things we needed to do during the pandemic was pivot and help restaurants come up with alternative ways to serve food. So, things like outdoor dining, obviously there were things like tents, stuff like that. So we saw an 18% increase in inspections from 2020 to 2021, and 14 over a 2-year period. So we have some major projects going on. Again, those major projects require a lot more effort and review. These are some of the things that we do as far as public health and emergency medical services. We do work with the community doing BP clinics. We provide COVID testing to different entities, different town departments. We supported all the town departments with COVID testing, keeping people at work. So we were able to get a benchtop PCR testing machine, which allowed us to do instant tests with we had the top tier results, the gold standard for COVID testing. So we were able to do that and support our local department. So if a DPW worker came in, didn't feel good, he was able to come to the fire department. We were able to test him and make sure that he did not have COVID, and then was able to return to work, or conversely had COVID, and we sent them home for the quarantine period. So we gave out 1,200 vaccines, Moderna vaccines, about 317 flu vaccines last fall. So some of the needs and gaps, obviously, staffing, especially with the issues going on right now with our emergency medical services. We'd love to have a dedicated second ambulance for the town. Right now, we run there's 2 firefighter paramedics assigned to the ambulance all the time. They don't come off. If there's a fire and they're available, they respond to the fire in the ambulance. That way, if the fire gets under control, or it's a small fire or a false alarm, they're able to respond to the next call. So we, like I mentioned before, we're seeing increased hospital wait times, emergency room wait times. There's a lot of volume. There's also a crisis in the ambulance industry where a lot of the private ambulances aren't available. Their staff units are way down, so that helps. That doesn't help. So the hospital system is clogged up. So people that need to be transferred from a community hospital to a major Boston hospital, might be waiting 48 to 72 hours where they might have an ambulance in 3 hours before. So, and then obviously, we'll always talk about the need for a substation. That's something the town needs to plan for in the future. I think it's going to be an important piece of public safety in the future. Having a secondary area where we can deploy fire, rescue, and EMS apparatus. Improve response times, especially as the town grows. So currently, right now, this is our current deployment model. You have eight firefighters assigned to a shift. They work on 4 working groups, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Consists of a captain, a lieutenant, and 6 firefighters. They average about 11 calls a day. Today, as of an hour or two ago, they did about 15 calls. So one time we had 6 calls going on at once. We run one dedicated ambulance. We run one dedicated piece of fire apparatus, and then the other 4 people float between fire and ambulance depending on what the call is. So it's a bit of the Chinese fire drill, if you will. So just wanted to highlight. So we have one ambulance call, and that ambulance goes to Boston, like it did this morning. Then we have a subsequent ambulance call. So that now takes out, because of the cross staffing, that takes up a piece of fire apparatus and a piece of EMS equipment out of service. And then one of the things that became necessary after Norwood Hospital closed is staffing a 3rd ambulance, because we're getting that 3rd medical call. And we have to go with the call we have as opposed to the potential call. So we might have a fire, we might have a car accident, we might have whatever, but if a medical call comes in, we need to send that piece of apparatus. So we're sending the 3rd. So that leaves one truck with 2 people covering the community. And that was what we had for a majority of the day. So if a building fire comes in, or a car accident or anything else, we're stretched pretty thin, especially when it comes to, the distances these people are traveling to take people to the hospital. So I want to highlight that, so the measures we took to kind of, minimize the impact of Norwood Hospital closing, it is putting the community at a bit of risk. There is risk that comes with that. So we don't have a complement of firefighters available should a building fire come in. So the budget allows for us to fill to 8 firefighters with all scheduled leave. So if they're on personal leave or vacation time, they are funded for backfilling those positions. But if somebody takes bereavement or sick, we don't cover it. So the night we had the fire on Central Street, we were actually short 1 firefighter, which took the second due engine off the road. So we didn't have a truck for the fire hydrant. The guys had to manually stretch a line to the fire hydrant instead of the second engine being able to lay that in and feed that. So, it does affect operations occasionally. When we do, fortunately, we have pretty good attendance record, and with the funding, we're funded most of the time for 8 people. So
you have 8 people as a team. Is there a national standard, and what's the national standard call for?
Yeah, the national standard would be NFPA 1710. They call for fire apparatus to be staffed with 4 people, and they have time elements. They want a full what's called a full first alarm assignment at any building fire within 8 minutes. So that would be 12 to 15 firefighters within 8 minutes at a building fire, and they actually have a standard, which would be a standard 1,800 square foot cape with no basement. That would be the deployment model, and that's the standard. But obviously we don't come close to meeting that with the with the volume of ambulance calls we're doing, in the double duty. So it is a challenge. So we do rely on mutual aid, but obviously mutual aid, that 8 minutes is we're not gonna hit that mark. I did want to just draw a comparison to the SEMRAC communities. Again, we all agreed when we went through the process with SEMRAC that the communities were very similar. We happen to have the smallest population, but if you look, we actually have the second highest run volume. We have the lowest amount of staffing. We only have, we're covering the most amount of territory because if you look, other people have multiple stations, so we're covering the full 20 square miles from one location. We have a town like Easton, they have 3 stations, which they're covering 9.7 miles per station. So, with the lowest budget. So we're really, I truly believe we're operating as well efficiently as we can.
Yeah.
And there's really not much room for increasing call volume without an increase in staffing.
Yeah.
So,
So Chief, as you said, Norwood Hospital is one of the busiest ERs in the whole state, and that's offline, and Sturdy can't handle that volume. How much, and what's really relevant to Foxborough is how much is that ambulance response time degraded? Because minutes save lives when it comes to somebody has a heart attack, and whether the ambulance gets there in 4 minutes or 10 minutes, that can be life or death. The other thing is how much have you expanded, what paramedics can do in the field?
yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, yes, like today we had to have Mansfield, and I believe Sharon came in to help us out. At one point, all of our units were completely tied up, answering multiple calls, and then we had to have, help come in from other communities. But so that, right there is a delay when you're waiting for Mansfield or Sharon to come in to help us out. And also the transport distance, that obviously so the other problem is there's a lot of consideration, so that the officers that are on the shifts making the decisions as to where people go and what, the point of entry. So, there's certain hospitals that are stroke centers, there's certain hospitals that are burn centers, there's certain hospitals that have, cardiac catheterization 24/7 as opposed to on call. So there's a lot of things that are on the paramedic's mind in terms of where people are going, time of day. Obviously, trying to get to Mass General at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is damn near impossible. So we've got to really consider closer hospitals like Good Samaritan. Good Samaritan's high volume, very busy, urban ER. So they see a ton of patients there. So going there, it's a very busy place. And, depending on the acuity, if we go there in the time of day, and again, their volume might not be the best for our patients either. So we really have to be considerate as to where we're taking people, and again, time of day, the services available. Good Samaritan's a level 3 trauma center. So it's good for trauma, so that they have services available there. Sturdy does not. A lot of the Boston hospitals have the level 1 trauma designation. We go there. Rhode Island Hospital is another option. Miriam Hospital in Providence has a pretty good cardiac catheterization lab. So those are all considerations we have to take. But there's a lot of things where, a lot of those decisions would have to be made if no one was here.
My 2 separate questions. The first one, mutual aid with the ambulances. A few years ago, it was quite imbalanced with Mansfield, but they added staff and fixed that. Is it approximately equal now? And the second question is, I recall that you got a secondhand ambulance because the one that was on order is not yet ready. So you do have an ambulance in the works. Is that correct?
We've ordered 2 ambulances. Yes, we have 2 ambulances that are on order. We ordered them last July. We still don't have VIN numbers for those chassis. So I did at the last minute. We had some money left in our budget, and we combined that with some money that we had in our apparatus revolving account, and we were able to buy an ambulance that was a brand new chassis that had a box remounted on it. And that's what we're using now. It's a small little ambulance you see running around town. Just because of the mileage, we had pretty significant mileage on our ambulance. We, in cases we're putting on 5 times the mileage that we would have normally on these vehicles. So that was one of the measures we had to take. But we have 2 ambulances on order, and we have no idea when we're going to be able to get them.
So financially, we have done what we can to support the ambulance. It's not that we haven't budgeted it. It's simply that we haven't been able to get them from the manufacturer.
As far as the ambulances themselves, the vehicles, yes, that is a correct statement. Yeah, the town is certainly invested in the ambulance, and and certainly, there's a well-supported program. Just the staffing is what it concerns me as far as not having people available to go on emergency calls.
So, did you say that we are approximately on balance with respect to the mutual aid?
Yeah, so there's communities around us that are experiencing shortages. It's one community, Bentham's civil service. They're having difficulty hiring paramedics. They're a little short-staffed right now, so that's a little imbalance. We're running over there quite a bit. But that's something that I have a sense that will level off in the near future. So, it ebbs and flows. Some communities have different different pressures, different stresses. So, different things going on, but that's just one example. But those problems always seem to be self-solving.
Chief, when is Norwood Hospital due to be back online? What year?
That's a great question.
We got plenty of billboards up and down Route 1 saying they're coming back, but when is that going to happen?
We haven't seen much in terms of what construction, things like that. I haven't heard of a lot. There's a meeting tomorrow that Stewart's doing with the fire chiefs to have a conversation about it. But we have these meetings, and then you really don't see a lot of action. I know there's been rumors that they've said that they're not bringing back the psych beds or OB, so they won't have OB care there. So it's just a shame. I was born there.
Yeah.
My daughter was born there, so
I was born there.
yeah.
There's also rumors that Stewart is trying to shop themselves and be acquired. So,
it is. They are a for-profit entity. They're a for-profit corporation, so they're obviously going to do, what they need to do to help their bottom line. They had some really, like, if you look at them nationally, they're an international company, but if you look at them nationally, they have some unique models down in Texas. They have standalone emergency rooms and other unique things as an accountable healthcare organization. So they're always trying different delivery methods of healthcare. I'm not sure that those methods would be effective up here because of the proximity to Boston and having some of the finest medical facilities in the world right at our fingertips. Understandably, like Texas, other places have more remote areas. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd be very curious to see if Norwood comes back, as it was, as we all knew it 5 years ago. So I have a sense that it's not, but that's just my own intuition. I have no evidence to support that. So,
Dan, just to support your question relative to when that hospital is going to open, this is the third time I've had this conversation today about that one facility. We talked about it at operations this morning, and we talked about it with the seniors this afternoon, and now we're having it again tonight. So it's very relevant, and it's something that we're watching very, very closely. Apparently, the governor was out to participate in a groundbreaking ceremony recently. But the backstory on that is that it's unclear as to how far along they really are in that process of getting the developer. You're talking years down the road. I mean, it's a couple of years before they demo it and then they rebuild it and then fully get it operational. You're at least a couple of years out before you see it operational again.
Yeah, and there's a lot of processes. It's not like just throwing a building up. It's heavily regulated by the Department of Public Health. Everything has to be approved and reviewed and inspected. So there's the only thing regulated more than hospitals is nuclear power plants. So being as bureaucratic as that process is going to be, I would have to imagine that it's going to be quite a few years.
Yep, absolutely. Is that the end of your slideshow, Chief?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
it. It's a pretty it's a pretty lean year. Looking for about 70,000 total. It's about a 1.8% increase in the budget. 40,000 of that would be seed money for the mechanics to do apparatus work, so they can continue the apparatus program. 10,000 of that was the addition of the Juneteenth holiday. And then the remainder was some contractual items and just some modest increases in some other overtime lines. So nothing there's nothing really major there. So it's like I said, it's about a 1.8% increase, I think, overall, about 70K.
Okay. All right, awesome. Barring any further questions, I'm gonna ask the chief to just run through real quick, especially for those who this is their first year or first annual town meeting, the fire stabilization warrant article. If you could just run through that real quick, describe it for the new members and how that applies to this year, that would be great.
Sure. So, and then Bill can correct me with any technicalities, but basically, we had a really good idea in using the revenues coming in for fixing apparatus to go into the apparatus revolving account, which was established to help us maintain vehicles. We built, it's mostly from Gillette Stadium, but any vehicles used on a detail, that money would come in and then go back out to replace those vehicles or pay for repairs. So we decided to merge those two accounts with the blessing of the selectmen, and it seemed to be okay. And then the auditors came in and said, you can't do that. So their suggestion to fix the issue was to create a fire overlay account where that money would go in. We would purchase parts and things of that nature year to year, and that would be legal.
Awesome. Were you planning on doing anything with it this year in terms of purchases or amounts or anything like that?
No, just again, it was one of those things. I think it was more of just a kind of like the one auditor said this really isn't technically the way this is supposed to work. So the correct way to do this would be to have an overlay account. So I think once it's established, we'll be able to use it year over year just to support the program. So it doesn't impact the budgets. It's kind of a separate thing.
It's really an accounting correction is what it is, Dan, because the current the way we were doing it is not consistent with the rules of accounting. So we have to make an adjustment and create the new accounting process, which will make it entirely kosher with the auditors.
There's a minor correction here. It's not an overlay account; it's a stabilization account.
Stabilization account, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. Any further questions for the chief?
I have just a question and a comment, and again, it's directed to Bill Keegan, and it's around, we're hearing about some of these staffing needs from the fire department as well as the police chief, and I'm just wondering if Foxborough, your office and the Board of Selectmen, is there a larger process or strategic planning process that looks out multiple years and says, yes, we have these needs and this is where we're targeting to address it, as opposed to just each annual year comes along and we say, well, how much can we afford, and put some constraints on the various departments, and that's a limit. Is someone looking at the larger picture and a plan to address the larger needs?
So I think it's a very fair question, and I think if you take a look, and I think the both chiefs will tell you that we have made significant steps on addressing their staffing needs over the past several years. In fact, both the fire department and the police department have grown staff-wise over the past 5 years. Chief Kelleher, I think it is the past 5 years we've added at least four or five firefighters to the department, and so we're trying to do it in a way that makes sense both financially as well as strategically. So you're absolutely right that we're not, and then of course we have to, and then again, we're dealing with a situation where you can see where the numbers are starting to creep up in terms of responses and the amount of efforts that are going out, which has sort of just impacted us in recent years, not so much in the earlier years. So I think that's something we're going to have to adjust to, and maybe look at ways that we can further support both police and fire, because that world is evolving fairly quickly, and it's one that's it's concerning to me, because on its face value, it's tough for us to support those efforts given the level of revenue that we have. But you can see what the police chief and what the fire chief and the police chief are doing is more so probably in the fire department. They're doing more entrepreneurial types of efforts to try and bring more revenues in that can help offset that. And so we're able to do more perhaps with the fire department than they are with the police, because we're able to use those ambulance funds to help support their equipment as well as their staffing. So we actually supplement the budget with funds that come from those efforts. And then also the same thing is going to hold true with the repairs to vehicles that the chief has undertaken there in recent years, in the past year, which is again another way to help support the budget. So we're again constantly looking at ways in which we can be creative and do things that make sense. Again, the two things that we're looking for in terms of articles this year is, billboards, which is a revenue generator for the town, as well as marijuana. So I think those are new ways that we should, but in terms of the specific operations, both fire and police are trying to do what they can to raise money to help support their budget. But outside of the taxing capacity of the town, because the tax itself will not support either one of these operations in and of itself.
All right, thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Bill. With that, I'm going to move to the next line item, which is the town clerk. Thank you, Chief Kelleher. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you all for your service too. Appreciate the time you guys put into this.
Thank you.
Yes, Chief.
Mr. Cutler.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I am phenomenal. Would you like to present? Or are you just going to talk? The floor is yours.
Okay. My budget year to year is pretty basic. It doesn't go up a lot. As you can see, for this period, it's only up 2.1%. There are areas, especially in the elections budget, that require some additional funding based on the proposed changes to election laws that'll be coming up for 2022. The plan that we're hearing, although it hasn't passed the legislature yet, is that they're going to institute all of the 2020 election changes that were brought in through the pandemic. So that would include additional in-person early voting, as well as by-law voting. So we can anticipate all the postage costs that we had before would be there again. So I've asked for an additional $5,000 in the postage costs for the election department, as well as overtime for the election workers. We have an election in September and November. So it's going to require early voting in person and early voting by mail. So those are the big changes. As far as the town clerk side of it, as far as salaries, we're right at the 2% right now. And as far as the administrative expenses for that department, I think there was just one office equipment increase for $500 based on maintenance plans for our different software programs that we use in the office. And there's some additional office equipment maintenance for the election equipment maintenance programs that we have for the two different types of equipment that we use. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward and pretty much a straight line, no increases.
All right, I appreciate that. Dennis, do you have anything you want to add? I believe you were the liaison for this.
Yeah, no, we went over this pretty thoroughly with Bob, and we didn't find anything to suggest that there was anything meaningful to cut back on or anything like that.
Okay. All right, cool.
Certainly not the season to start cutting back on election expenses.
For sure. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, a question for Bob on, you've observed elections now for, I'll say 20 years, long time anyway.
Yeah.
And we have proposals for early voting and mail-in voting. To what extent does that increase the percentage, or let me just say the number of voters? Is it a 5% increase? What?
Historically, for the early voting, there hasn't really been any increase in the voter turnout. 2020 is an outlier because it was such a, I don't want to know the proper word for it, but it was very contentious election in 2020. So you had an increase in the presidential election, but realistically, it was only like a 2 or 3% increase from the other presidential elections that I've overseen. So in Foxborough, anyways, it really wasn't much of an increase. There was an increase in the primary in September, but that was because the Secretary of State's office sent out postcards to every single voter. I imagine you probably got one at your own home. Anyone that was registered in Massachusetts was sent a postcard application for by mail voting. So there was an increase for that particular election. But overall, historically, we've seen no real increase in voter turnout due to the by mail voting.
Does that answer your question, Jack? All right, very cool. Any further questions for Bob? Okay, thanks. Quick and easy.
Great. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Yeah, you as well. So the last line item I have on the agenda is voting on the approval of prior meeting minutes. I know Paul sent them out for everyone's review on Sunday night. I didn't hear anything back, so I assume that means all of you read them and you agree with them. Awesome, sweet. So I'm going to go first with the February 2nd minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the February 2nd minutes?
I make a motion to approve the February 2nd AdCom minutes.
Second.
All right, I have a second. All in favor, please raise your hands high. Okay, that's unanimous. Any against? Okay, wonderful. Now we'll do the February 9th minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Do I have a motion for the approval of the February 9th minutes?
I'll make a motion again to approve the February 9th AdCom minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Jack. Wonderful. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? I have an abstention. Awesome. Okay, that is approved. I don't have anything else on the agenda. So would anyone like, Raphael, do you have something?
I do have a question. Paul sent out an email today about the warrants. And I was just wondering on the zoning warrants that we may have to vote on again, can we use the same write-ups or do we have to make do something different on those, or should they be exactly the same?
My understanding is you probably could make an edit if you wanted to. I don't think we will be required to. I think we'll probably just need to update them for the correct dates and things like that. But I don't think we need to take it any farther than that.
Okay.
I would agree with that, Dan. I don't think there's any reason to change any of the actual language. It's the same. The action is it was a technical issue in the decision
Right.
and the process more than anything. So it didn't have anything to do with the actual information contained in the articles themselves.
Correct. Yep.
We should know by March 8th, by the way, if that is in fact going to happen, if we need to include them in the warrant or not. That's the latest information that Bob has been trying to get out of the Attorney General's office. So
Okay.
that. Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I do have another question, just so I'm
Sure, absolutely.
So on March 2nd, next Wednesday, we'll just be speaking about all of the different presentations and departments, going through the budget ourselves, or no? Or maybe warrants? Will that come up next?
I do believe Paul
Yeah.
sends out something about that. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Bill.
Okay.
Dan, I did see something from Paul today, and I need to follow up with him tomorrow on some of those things, because I did actually include Leah Gibson in some of those, and Leah's away this week, so I'm going to follow up with her as well as Paul to coordinate the schedule for those things, so we can make sure we have the right people in place for the presentations. None of us really know the individuals who submitted the citizens petitions. So we're going to refer back to Bob because they were submitted to him, and see if we can get the names of those individuals, and then reach out to them directly to see if they want to come in and make the presentation to your committee. But as far as the marijuana, the billboard issues, the door-to-door sales, and the changing the selectmen to the select board, those were all things that the selectmen and myself will be working with. I believe on the billboards will be ZBA chairman as well, and perhaps the planning board on the marijuana issue as well. So we'll be working jointly with a couple boards to make those presentations on those items.
Yep, wonderful. And to what Bill just said, that is the warrant articles that Bill just listed are the ones that Paul had listed for next Wednesday for March 2nd. So it looks like warrant articles will be our topic. And then I believe the budget, looks like we'll be doing warrant articles March 2nd and March 9th. And then we'll get into the budget. It looks like that's Paul's plan. So.
Okay.
We'll also be working on the capital plan in between that on Saturday the 5th, if I'm not mistaken, Dan. Is it March 5th, I think?
I think so, yeah.
It's a Saturday, I think. It's a Saturday we'll be doing that. So, and that will be, Paul will be participating in that representing the committee on that part of it.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Do I have an motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
We'll have
See you
Paul
next
back
week.
to lead you next week.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks for all your help. Good night.
Good night.